Another episode. Thanks, listeners, for tuning in. We are excited to talk to you again. And today we are going to talk about a topic that I am really fascinated by. I'm fascinated by all things business and marketing. So what's new, you all say. But I don't know, not many people talk about this. So I am kind of a little excited. I do want to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And the concept I want to talk about today that I've talked Alex into, and he's come along kicking and screaming, but he's here with us, is core competence. Mm-hmm. And the concept of some companies are just not good at things, and they're good at other things. Mm-hmm. And it's so fascinating. I think for us as marketers, you talk about sometimes that the business strategy, affects what we can do. We have to operate within that. Mm-hmm. Strategic decisions that the company makes, we are kind of stuck cleaning up the mess afterwards effectively if it's a poor decision. If it's a good decision, thank you, that helps. That helps us do our job. One of the reasons I believe, and there's a really interesting Harvard business article, review article from about 1990. It's a long time ago. This concept's been around a while and people, we just don't talk about it, so I want to talk about it, is the idea that some companies just can't do some stuff and others can. Mm-hmm. And that might be when you hear like your boss or your company, if it feels like a bit of a radical change in strategy, you might go, we can kind of see the market need there. Mm-hmm. I think there is a market need. You might feel this. Then the other question is, but can we do a good job of that? Mm. And if you're already an established company and you're making quite the pivot, you just might not be able to do it. There's a lot of legacy, there's processes, there's culture, there's things that are just in place that you may not be able to overcome. And I have seen this because one thing we advise on often is the strategy or the marketing strategy for businesses, and it's usually telling them not to do stuff, right? And I can think of an example, but I've got one in particular in my head. 5 years ago, I said, don't chase an accounting market, don't chase all this stuff. They're a business that could do back-end work for accountants, but they also did transactional finance work for C-suite. That doesn't sound that different, right? Oh, it's just bookkeeping, right? Like it's just accounting, accounts payable, accounts receivable. Do it for either of them. Well, in practice, it's very different, and the processes that are needed, the knowledge that's needed, everything the owner of the business or the director of the business. Like what are they good at? Because it filters down from there. Yep. And for something that looked kind of similar, one went well and one didn't. And that, to me, I could see very much that was about core competence. You're not good at the second one, even though there's a need. You're not good at it. You've built something that was never built for that. It wasn't designed to do that well, but it was designed to do the other thing well. So I think it is a consideration when you do make strategic business decisions, or if you are advising on that, is not just is there a need, but would we actually be good at that? Yeah. And I think Samsung and Apple are a good example as well. That I've heard Jeff Bezos talk about this. I quote him a bit, but he's quite smart. I know a lot of people don't like him, but some of the things he says are really interesting. And he talks about their core competence. I don't know if he uses that terminology, but he was talking about how Apple are the innovators, right? They drive things forward. That's what they're good at. They're designed to do that. Their culture is to do that. Their processes to do that. Every decision they've made is to be able to be good at that. Samsung, on the other hand, are a really good fast follower. That's what they're really good at. So let's say if Samsung tried to then innovate, my prediction is, and we'd have to define innovation and all that, but my prediction is it wouldn't go well. That's not what they're good at. They're good at following, and they're good at following very fast. Yep. So when someone's making a business decision, I think not only should it be about is there a need, but also would we be good at this, and are we set up to do this? We talked about the example we were reading about offline before we started talking to you beautiful listeners, was a brewery can't be a pub and a pub can't be a brewery. So it can be that close, it can be that they kind of look like the same thing, right? But no, they're different experiences. They take different skill sets. They take different processes. The people are there for very different reasons, even though it might look on the surface, they're just drinking beer, right? Everyone's just putting one back.
It's all the same thing, yeah.
Yeah, but the brewery, they're probably not putting back 20. At the pub, they might be. So
It's different, and it's like the whole, like the product, the value, the person person and like is aligning in that. And I do agree with it. I think it's probably a matter of how much I guess the competencies sway from that. So like the big example I used before was like with Netflix, right? Streaming service. And I mean, they're into games now. I've never touched a game on there. Maybe I'm not the right demographic for it, but they have games on there. And I go, well, clearly they've been doing it for a while now. So maybe that's part of their competency. And I look at it more of like a scale or a Venn diagram to go, how much is this in their competency? If they started opening bakeries, that's wildly different. Like that's just so totally opposite everything. And I mean, I don't know, maybe people buy a Netflix bakery. I don't know, but it's so far off there. And yeah, to your point, it's like the internal processes, the skills you've hired, the culture that's in there, the available resources, the leadership, it all has to fit together. And I think on that one there too, but Netflix did it with the production. And I think that made from a strategic sense that obviously they were paying all this money for the rights of these shows and movies. And they're like, well, they're one of the FANG companies. They've got that much money, billions and billions of dollars. Like, let's just make our own stuff. So I think that was more of a process innovation where they started making their own company, their own movies, and then huge investment. But I would say the more deviation and the more you go outside of your competencies, which you could maybe argue you're looking into more parts of the market. And with high risk comes high return. So I feel like that was a hugely risky thing for them. A $1 billion company, a $500 billion company that sacrifices $2 billion, maybe not that risky. Like it's 4% of your revenue. So maybe that was worthwhile. But I mean, that sort of, it's still in the same, and I use the word flavor a lot because it's sort of like chocolate ice cream with peanuts on top. It's sort of complementary in that same one. But if you did chocolate ice cream with pepperoni, it's like two very different things that end up making everything worse. So yeah, I think when it comes to those, like, is it adjacent? Is it complementary? Does it fit in together? And there was one I use, a lot of B2B software companies do play with services. Pretty much every company I've ever tried to help has dabbled in that at some point. And what I mean by that is the whole point of a business in general, again, you take the product, you take everything aside, you're in the market to serve a need for the customer. And software, I always say, is a tool to get an outcome. Your tool, if they could get the outcome without your tool, they would. And many people do. So it's like, what is the thing they want? And for example, there was ones with helping for social impact for these large organizations. So you take Telstra, they're doing a DEI strategy about their diversity and inclusion. How do they create a plan? How do they manage that plan? They sold the software, but before they can get to the software, you have to make the plan. So they do things like, well, should we get involved with making plans? Some good, some not. The sake of some of their plans, and to your point, their core competencies, one of them had made those plans in the past. So it was aligned. And they said, well, yeah, we'll start doing that. We'll start writing your plan for X dollars. And then if you use our software, we'll give you a discount on the services. That was all very aligned. It made total sense. But there's other ones where another company I work for who did engineering drawing management for these large companies. It was like, hey, same thing again. We'll use your software, but our drawing processes are not good. And we need an entire drawing standard done. And for those who've done, it's quite complex. And it is a huge document that needs to be aligned with all these stakeholders and costs a lot of money. I'm talking like 50 grand more. And you need to hire 2 or 3 people to be focused on that. And the software was a fraction of that in price. So you spend all this money and hire all these people, develop all this competency to get this little outcome. And so to me, I said that wasn't aligned. And they tried it a couple of times. But see, I think it's got to be aligned to the one both financially, culturally, product-wise, market-wise, person-wise. It's got to be chips with a burger, not a bicycle with a burger. Like it's got to be like...
Would you like a bicycle with that burger?
Yeah. And that same one too about like McDonald's there, like to create a fry machine there, 2 seconds. It's very easy. If you were to sell, I don't know, like you start selling spatulas, it's like, well, then you've got to have a whole nother part of the shop is now have to open up and all this extra work has to come into it.
Yeah, and it's interesting though, like how we define a core competency of a business, because it's not like I don't necessarily mean it's one thing either. We could say core competencies, but also, yeah, like I think of McDonald's, I'm like, but they're good at fast food. You know, they're not good at they're not that great at burgers, let's be honest, but they're good at quick burgers that are well known, that are convenient, and we know what you're going to get.
Yep.
So yeah, I like a few points on that I would make. Firstly, I'll start with the Netflix example of doing the production thing. My first thing is that like that does seem like, to me, that's like, wow, that's a wildly different competence. That's a different business. Like
it is a whole different business.
You're producing movies as opposed to distributing them. I'm going to use an example first, and I'm going to come back to that, because I remember recently I was talking to a marketing agency who wanted my help, and somehow it got on to that they wanted me to do social media stuff. So I was like, well, why am I here? You do not want that from me, and I don't want to do that. But what was interesting about that is I hadn't done it before. And in my mind, I was asking a lot of questions about what the expectations from the clients would be and from the company themselves. And to me, they felt a little bit flippant about that, about, like just doing some things here and there. I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, no, this person's going to be held accountable for sales. I know how this ends. And also it felt like building a different arm to the business because it was a branding agency who hadn't had any experience in 15 years in doing any performance marketing or they've never been held responsible for sales before, like direct. You know how it works. I didn't see that as a social media service. I saw that as branching out effectively into an entire new way of doing business. Like you're offering something that you are not competent in, frankly. So
that then distracts you from
your
core competency.
Yeah, and you're getting someone in to then do that, and it's like, no, I don't. I think that would need to come internally over time. I don't think you should outsource that. I think that was really risky. I didn't want to do that. In the Netflix example, my first point that I thought of as you're talking about is there's like, has that experiment played out that their idea to do the production company was a good idea? Like, has that played out? I'm not sure. I'm actually not sure about that. It might have. I don't know the costs of that side of things. I don't actually know why they do it at all. Yeah, I don't know why they do it. So I can't comment on that. We did talk about offline before we came onto this, though, like if Netflix started opening a cinema chain. And my thoughts there too would be, my prediction would be they wouldn't do a good job of that because that's selling a completely different experience. Then you, I think, weren't in agreement with that necessarily. But that's where I see you've got a chain, like a cinema chain, that you're providing like this in-person experience for people. And, cinema chains are effectively popcorn retailers with, with a movie that you watch. They're not really movie theaters. They're all the margin comes from the popcorn.
Yeah.
My prediction would be they wouldn't be able to do it well. I don't think but you've got a different view there.
Yeah, Again, I think it's probably the same as the production, right? I think, and this is actually a very, very clear thing to say, I think you can sway, my opinion is, you can sway from the core competency when you have enough momentum and you have established business. So I think Netflix, again, is insanely strong market fit, $1 trillion, one of the world leading companies. I think you can afford to sway and risk deviating from your competencies or looking around there. If you're a startup and you haven't sold 10 to 10 customers and you want to create this new product, don't. Like, focus on what you're doing, focus on your competency, be very clear of what you do. I mean, I would say probably not for the reasons of competency. I would say that the market is probably not there. Like, I would say movie theaters are somewhat dying out as they are. And I think all the Hoyts and all the large companies now are really struggling. I don't know. I'm not from that market, but that's at least what I'm seeing on the surface. So I would say from a competency, and that first step is, should you do it? Or not could you do it, should you do it? Like, okay, let's just say for whatever reason, everyone's getting sick and tired of sitting watching Netflix at home, they want to branch out and they want experiences, sure. And if I was from the Netflix side of things, I would say, well, what are we going to offer different that's going to make people come to our movie theaters? Because if they can watch the same movie at home, why would they go to the movie theater? And I would look at all these ones and say, what you should do. I think they could do it. I think they could if they can make an entire production arm, which to me is 10 times more riskier. I think they could do a movie theater. But yeah, my questions from the marketing go-to-market perspective would be, is there enough there? Is there a demand for it? What would you offer in that movie theater that you can't offer at home? It's like when you go to watch the football, right? Like back in the day before the TV was just one camera watching I'm talking more NRL, but people would go to the game because you had a few beers, you got to see some people, watch the game in person, the atmosphere, and that was it was the same product, but you got far better experience. You were selling an experience. Now you've got, these huge TVs at home now with high definition and 20 different camera angles. And now myself and a lot of people, maybe we're just getting older, but I'm like, I would way rather. I don't mind going to a game. It's kind of fun, especially if it's a big game. But I would way rather stay indoors and watch it on there. So I even feel like there's a big issue now that apparently has happened with that football there, is that so many people have now prefer to stay at home because it's a better experience. And there's really struggle with ticket sales, which again is where the margin's made. So there's all these negotiations and advertising things you have to do. But my point is that back to that Netflix thing is looking at like, I would look at doing those core competencies, but never forgetting the fundamentals of go-to-market of why are we doing this. And I think the production one warranted deviating from their competencies more because there was a need in the market, because they were losing so much of their margins and paying the royalties to these big production companies and going like, we could literally save and make a substantial amount more money if we deviated from our core competencies. But then again, the core competencies, I see it's still going back to the point. It's the same customer, same experience, same value. I was just thinking as you're talking about the cinema there too, like you would be restricted and you'd have to play Netflix movies. Yeah. So you'd be right back where you started.
Yeah. So why would you go on and play other movies from other people? And strategically speaking, wouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
But then like it wouldn't make sense to open the chain either because people would probably need more variety than that from a cinema. Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
And like you can stay at home, watch the same thing as well. And I think also with it, when it comes to the movie theater one, is that if you play the same movies, but I think if you were to do it, you'd lean heavily into the experience. So I would go like back in the day when they used to do the new premieres. Like I'd have one in Hollywood, for example, or LA or New York. And if I was them, I would consider a Netflix cinema, but I would use it purely for premieres because
that's cool.
You're selling an experience. And I would go like, Man's Chinese Theatre in Hollywood. Remember the old, which I don't even know how it came about, but that Chinese theatre in the middle of Hollywood, and it was like the movie theatre that every major Hollywood blockbuster got premiered at. And it stopped becoming a movie theatre and it became a production, which then changed the product, I guess. So yeah, I would come back to the core competencies, but what's it going to do for the business?
Yeah, I mean, when you use that example, though, my mind goes to if you had a theatre for a premiere, that's not really your business still. You're not getting into another business. I'd say that's a promotional choice.
Yep.
And yes, I'm sure that they can manage one theatre and do premieres and put on effectively good events. You know, like I can see that. That's different to me than
it's a marketing play more than as a product.
Yeah, it's not changing what business you're in my mind, which is interesting. But yeah, it's good. I've had all sorts of thoughts as we're talking through this. I still probably go back to the fact: are we confident that the production decision by Netflix is a good one? Because we can certainly say that Netflix got to where they did because they were a streaming service. No one can really argue with that. That's how they got there. That worked. Then they're there. And as you said, they theoretically can blow a lot of money. And, like all big companies can just blow a lot of money and it doesn't really matter. Are we saying that was a good decision? Like, have we ended there where we're like, yep, good decision? Has that played out yet? Would be one thing that I would think about. I'll let you answer that in a minute because I want to talk to you, one of the other points you made as well, around how one of the companies you worked with got into earlier in the planning process. In my mind, when I heard that, I'm like, straight away went to, it's probably the founder doing that, I'm guessing. They actually did those, they had the domain expertise and did those plans. And a founder early on in a company can, I think, maybe justify that. And that might be what they need to do to win a few contracts here and there. I just wonder when it gets to 50 people, whether that would still be doable, whether that pivot would be doable at that point. So I can see, like, to me, that's a bit more like a founder just doing what they need to do, just to
get things over the line.
Get something over the line. I don't think it would be effective in a 50-person company, would be what I'd say to that. But yeah, feel free to respond. Like, I'm really, I don't know, I'm really on that point about are we convinced that Netflix's decision to go into production, if it's a good business decision or not, is what I'm kind of referring to.
Yeah. I mean, I think in terms of supply chain and margins, I think yes, absolutely. I think whether it's because they deviated into that one, whether it's good or not, is that, like, I think there's movies like Stranger Things. This is for Netflix. Stranger Things, Ozark, House of Cards, a couple of shows.
They're all Netflix.
They're all
shit.
Netflix.
Okay.
So
yeah,
this is one.
I might shut up then. Yeah.
But I think there's ones who, like, when they do nail it, like, again, you own the whole margin. There is no fat in that because you own the whole supply chain. So you've done very well. I mean, zooming out at a macro effect, I think there's some issues there around terms of writers, and they've seen a lot of issues in the last couple of years with writer strikes and stuff like that. That the person, same as Spotify, the person who gets squeezed is the artist. So there's issues there in that sense. But as their business, they then take back all those margins. They get rid of all the fat. But then it comes down to more of, well, then you need to make sure you don't drop the bat because you've just taken business from people who've been doing this for, frankly, 150 years, these production companies, some of them, and then you're moving in a house. So you've got to figure out a way to keep that high value in there. And yeah, I think things like, again, I think some ridiculous thing about Stranger Things is, like, majority of their margin or a huge chunk of their revenue came from them because it was so popular and it did so well. And House of Cards was the first Netflix produced show. That's how they, pioneered it, because they went, if we're going to do this, we need to make it top class, and they got a very good writer, which is a good show. And then Kevin Spacey, who's now not doing well, but he was a huge name, and they were just like, we're not going to half-ass this. We're not going to get B grade actors. We need A grade actors, A grade writers, insane amount of investment, and it worked. I think everyone went, oh crap, this actually does work. Again, it comes down to the competency, technical side, supply chain, successful. It's a matter of, can they, and to your point, them being writers, that's not their competency, and them being, because they were tech people, writers, producers, huge deviation, but to the same product.
Yeah. I wonder how they did it now. because I don't actually know how they did it either, whether they actually bought out an existing production company and plugged that in or built it from scratch, but they still would have had to have, whoever you got in to do that would have been.
But huge risk, huge return. Like if I was in the boardroom, like you're like, Christ, that is huge. We're changing our entire business model. But the reward being, hey, you want to improve margins?
Yeah.
We can win another we can win another 1 million subscribers, which is very difficult, or we can take back 30% of our margin by just doing it ourselves, and that's long term.
Yeah. No. Well, okay. Interesting. I think you've almost trumped me there.
Right.
I feel a little stuck with my argument. But I just
Getting personal.
I wonder. How they did it. Like whether they are they white labeling as well? Like did they actually build a production arm, or what they do? I don't know what they
did.
did.
That's a good point. If any listeners, feel free to let us know.
Please let us know. Please send us a message. Jack@bearthepush.com, and this is you say your email address and we can let us know, or tell us on social media what actually happened, because I'm really interested now in what actually happened with how they did it. But they also did a pilot, so that's interesting as well. They tested on a small scale.
There's interesting stuff with it, and this is where, again, I keep harping on about this, but this is a whole, like, in my opinion, what real growth marketing is, because it's performance marketing, which is like optimizing your ads, but growth marketing in terms of the strategy is where this sort of competency stuff comes into it. And an example uses the charity I work for, the Orange Sky Laundry. So they do the vans, they do the laundry service, and they looked at heaps of investment, and they were like, how do we branch out, right? And the trouble thing with a charity is when you get more donations, you have to spend it quickly. You have to translate it into impact quickly, because you can't save it up investment. You're a non-profit, and it looks very bad. So it was a very interesting scenario, because they had an issue of their own success. They had a lot of great donations during COVID, of all things too.
Wow.
So one thing they said in the core competency was, where can we branch out? We just keep making more vans and keep doing stuff, or with the idea of build a laundromat. It's like, well, let's build one where we're at right now. Financially, it made sense. We could do something like 5 to 6 times the amount of laundry loads. There's all these things you could happen. But again, we weren't laundromat people. So we developed this structure and this internal team, and they had the foresight to do this really well. And I was very lucky to be part of it. But it was called Team Delta. But they talk about the idea of, you take all these ideas, and same with Netflix and all this stuff. I'm sure every company has a billion ideas. But what do we have a try this? Well, what's going to indicate that's going to work? Mathematically, without spending any money, can we do the sums to go, is this worth our time? Do we have any evidence to show it's worth our time? And then what is a viable, minimal viable test? What can we do to check if it's going to work? And thankfully, we had a guy who was getting rid of his laundromat in Adelaide, and he was in a great spot, and he was just like, I've been doing it for years, I'm over it, I'm tired, I don't have the money to reinvest and ramp it up again. So we had an investor that helped us, a donor that invested into it. We got all new laundromats, made it all hands-free, did it all really, really good. And it worked amazingly. Like, thousands of dollars of profit, which then turned into, we use that money to fuel other services. And I think they've now opened up a couple more laundromats. And so it was this whole, like, back to our point again, your competency is, in my opinion, you focus on the customer need, and what else around that bubble or that nucleus can support that as a business or as a customer.
I got a couple of questions. Listeners, this episode's probably going to be a long one. But why, why do you think that organization, you were able to do that so well? I'm really curious. And B, maybe even a harder question. Where would the line have been where it's like, oh, if we tried to do this, I think that would have been a step too far?
2 good questions. One was in the same, I think I've used this for every answer, leadership. The leadership team got it, the board got it, and the board trusted it and said what made it so well is that they identified we have to do something. Like if we keep operating what we are, it's not going to work. We're getting more donor, we have to activate it faster. We have to think outside the box. And the donor, the board and the leadership team said, we're willing to upfront that risk. We're willing to try something different around our competencies, around our area. And they were very good. Like I said, like, this is the amount of money we're going to test. And with every idea that if we're not going to win something, if we're not going to make it work, we want to learn. So at the end of the day, we're going to get something out of this. It was driven from the top down. It was supported from the top down. And it was stage gated from the top down. So when we went through those different stages, they validated it. And second question?
So I'm going to stay on that question though,
Okay.
because that doesn't, to me in my mind, that doesn't tell me though why you were good at it. That just says that you were prepared to give it a go.
Oh, sorry, you mean the laundromat?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, that particular.
Yeah. So why was that organization good at opening a laundromat? You hadn't done it before. Why were you good at that?
I think probably a couple of things. One, the brand affiliation was very strong. Like, the brand was always already huge. So when we had things like advertising, talked about it, people instantly were like, I know who these guys are. I think it was closely affiliated. Like it was like we were still providing that same need to people. And I think that what we're good at is that we treated it the same rollout as we did a van.
Okay, then I have another question then.
Yep.
So how different was it to what you were already doing?
It was different because it was commercially driven. Part of it was commercially driven. So it was different because back in the day, for example, you find a location where there is a need in the community for laundry services, and you bring a van out there and you sort of test it. This one was very dynamic. If that didn't work, you could pull the van, put it somewhere else. The laundromat was you had to do a lease of at least 12 months, and it was a fixed location that was always open. And so instead of running a shift with a leader and it was all the same process, it was an always on fixed location. There was things like there was heaps of hurdles that we had to figure out along the way, like security was huge in the end. You have a 24-hour laundromat, so you had to do automatic locking doors, security cameras. Cleaning was a huge one. I don't know how often a laundromat needed to be cleaned. A lot. Lint filters 2 or 3, like twice a day. So I think it did well because from a cultural perspective, the company was good at adapting. They weren't so hard. You said about Apple. They weren't like, this is what we do. We don't deviate. They were very good. One of their core values is having a crack. And it was like, we've never opened a laundromat, but let's figure it out. So that was good from a cultural perspective. And I think the idea that and still to this day, the best marketing team I've ever worked with is at that company because they all are so aligned. They're just so good at what they do that when it was like, here's the objective, here's what we want to do, the whole team got behind it. And it was like PR was running. We had a politician that came down, like it just worked. And then also from a product perspective, we already had the product available.
Yes.
So the laundry mats were already there. We knew how to service them. We knew how to set them up.
Yeah.
And it was all already automated.
You're not starting from scratch. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just, and sorry to keep squeezing, but it's like you have that culture of have a crack, right? But things that you would have had a crack at wouldn't have worked.
Heaps of things.
And it's like, why this one?
Well, it's kind of funny because I think using that framework, we tested and we validated the steps leading up to it. And we sort of went like, we didn't just go, open the laundromat, let's see what happens. It was like, we looked at the financials, we looked at what was possible, we looked at the need there. We had the numbers of the previous years for the laundromat to see the traffic. And we had indicators to say during COVID it dipped, but we're coming out of COVID at that point. So we had all these indicators that I think we tried to de-risk it. But there were other things.
That doesn't say why you're good at offering that service, though.
Purely just laundry service, I guess. The reason we're good at because we'd done 1 million laundry loads before that.
There you go. There's the answer.
We've done laundry was their bag.
Yeah,
it was everything they did.
Yeah.
So, which is kind of funny because the company even stands behind the whole point of what they're actually selling is it's not. They don't say they do laundry. They do connections. Because the whole point of the company was they started doing these laundry loads for people suffering from homelessness, and it turned into, whilst the laundry is going, it takes 45 minutes to run a full laundry load from go to work, that they ended up sitting down with these people and chatting to them, and these people went through awful times, and they said people kept coming back not because of, or partly with laundry, but because they want to talk to the team. So that was that they said that's what they were really selling or providing, but it was because we had one of our major sponsors was LG, so we had laundromats very quickly. We got them set up very quickly. We had a team of people who service the laundromats readily available. Like we had a lot of the production there.
But did you provide the connection in the physical laundromat?
Well, this is what was new is that we'd never done commercial laundry before, and we're never new to that. But we did. We ran it the same way that we run a van. You do weekly shifts, and so for 2 hours, I think it was like on a Monday, and we tried to make it a win-win. So like between 8 and 10 in the morning, I think it was, maybe even less than that. But between like 6 and 8 in the morning, 8 and 10 in the morning, free laundry, and so we couldn't discriminate. When someone walks in, we can't be like, well, you're not suffering too much, so you got to pay. It was just like, fuck it. Between these times, if you need free laundry, you get it for free, and you get as many as you want. And so we ran it the same way as a shift. So the same thing again, people would come down there, there'd be chairs would be set out, they would chat. Sometimes people would bring like sponsor with food and stuff and come along. So we treated it in those areas the same as the core competency. But it was never running a commercial laundromat, which ended in some sort of issues too, because some people, when we rolled it in part of the thing, were kind of like, well, I'm not here to run a financial business. Like, I'm not here. This is not my skill set. I don't want to do this. But then that was the organization's point to go, well, do we want to continue this? And the answer was yes. Because usually if you run one of these ones, it costs, I think, whatever it was, like a year, like a lot of money to build the thing, then all the overheads to run it as well. Whereas this was the only asset that paid for itself and made a profit. So it was very interesting to go, it just comes back to risk return, right? Like your competencies, how far do you think you can do it versus is it going to be worth if we deviate off this?
Yeah. Okay. That's fascinating. That's a great example for it. But then there's the second question, because I've asked a number of follow-up questions to the first one. Where would the line have been where you think you could have tried something that would have been too far outside the competency?
In general, for the thing? Yeah. Well, there was things we tried and didn't work, and this is the same. We documented it all and teach and do it the learnings to everyone. So some of them that didn't work, we looked at NDIS was one of them. So there's a service in the NDIS is laundry services. So we're like, oh, we already service some of these people anyway. Why don't we create an NDIS arm of the business and we will do delivery to it? And one of them was that like most of these people couldn't leave their house, but then we're like, that's not really our competency, right? Our competency is we sit and we talk to them. But then the whole point was it was financially wouldn't have worked. It was too expensive
to just go around to individual houses. We
had to hire a full-time driver to drive all the houses, pick up all the washing, and the money they made off that wouldn't have paid for that person, which meant the donor money had to be siphoned into this, which was not going to be nice for like anyone. There's other ones that we did camping spots. We looked at like, can we commercialize laundry services? So laundromat was one of them. The other one was, do we set up a laundromat within inside of a university? And the thing there, and we just say, hey, you guys stop buying expensive machines, we'll give it to you and you can do it on top of that. It turned out that it financially didn't make sense, and it was and they made a lot of their money from those services. The other one was holiday parks. We tried to do, which we did one for a break of it, but we had to set it up there. Made sense, and we got a lot of free advertising from that. We made some money off it. But because the pod we had set up or the van we had set up, it just cost a lot and you need someone managing it. So when it ran low on suds, when it needed more batteries, when it needed more power plugged into it, it got very complicated. So we put that down to say, okay, you need a fixed set and certainty of traffic and certainty of maintenance. So then the other ones we put aside. I mean, there was a bunch of others we did too. Courses we tried to do.
Courses sounds way outside to me. Like that's my first instinct, yeah.
Well, it's kind of funny because they did so good in what they do. They had a lot of other smaller up-and-coming non-profit organizations that ask them all the time. Like, can we talk to you for half an hour? We want to get your advice. And that's lovely. And they did provide it, but it got to the point where there were dozens and dozens and dozens. And we're like, our founders can't talk to this many people. We need them here. And so we thought, well, how about instead, there's clearly a market need here. Why don't we do a semi-year course university on how to get this up and running and how to solve this donors problems, all these things. Made sense. Market wasn't ready for it. Like, these are people who are just starting from the ground up and need more of a mentor than a university. So that didn't work. Well, to an extent. Yeah, there were like heaps of things, but it was all the different, not just are we competent enough to do this, but is it financially sustainable? Can we maintain this? Do we have to upskill and hire new people to do this? So,
cool.
Go donate to Orange Sky, anyone listening?
Yeah, well, that's we covered a lot in that episode. So as a long one, I do appreciate that being a long one. I love the idea of core competence, where it starts and ends for a company. And what they can do and what they can't. And just, like some people in your life, like they can just do some things and they're good at it and they're just terrible at other things. I think it's a similar concept. It's just, I would really struggle in a marketing agency myself. Really struggle. Okay. I don't think I'd do a good job at all of that. I do not think I'm built for it.
Why do you think that is?
Very tactical. A lot of context switching across different clients. A lot of really like behavioral metric focused stuff, so clicks and conversions and this type of thing. It would be a lot of selling a lot of things I don't believe in. But probably more that's more a value judgment, but more the competence is the context switching that I'm not good at. And I don't think I'll ever be great at it. I'm not big on tools. So the people in an agency, they're really good at a couple of tools. I'm not good at the tools. Okay. Right. Like I'm not good at getting in the tools and learning everything about it. And I'm not good at that. And that's a lot of context switching, because click to this, click to that. There's a lot of, Facebook Business Manager, like there's kind of no end. And Google Analytics, like all these things there's just more to learn, right? It doesn't interest me, and I'm not great at that. I don't know if that explains why I'd be bad at it, but certainly the context switching is what comes to mind.
Your passion's also not in it. Like I think you got to want to do as well. And I agree. Like if I had to do Facebook ads for the sake of someone asking me to do Facebook ads, I'd struggle with that because I'd want to know why and what are we doing and how we're doing it. Yeah.
So cool. Core competence. What is your business good at? What else could they do when you're making strategic decisions? But don't just look for a gap. In my mind, look for whether you'd be good at filling that gap. And and whether the company and the processes and the legacy and the competence of it is set up to do a good job of that. Fascinating to me. I really like this topic.
I do too.
If you can't tell.
Because it all comes down, right? And back to the point, come from a couple of episodes ago, I think it makes the marketing so much easier. If the whole company's aligned, if the competency all makes sense, if everyone's targeting as opposed to go sell pots and pans, if you're McDonald's, like, god damn.
Good to talk to you, Alex.
You too,
Talk
mate.
to you next episode.
See ya.
Bye.